you, Jeffrey. And we call this big C consciousness as opposed to little c consciousness. So I'm going to explain to you what that means. And so I'm a researcher at UCSD, UC San Diego, and I also work with ScienceONS, the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And we recently had Linda O'Brien set up a price of $100,000 where we're going to award the prize to someone that submits an experiment for scientific testing the hypothesis that consciousness is more than an emergent property of the brain. So the link I can put in the chat later is noetic.org/prize. And it's just opened yesterday. So now you can actually apply. The deadline is February 15th. And you can submit your experiment. And if it's the best one, you'll get $100,000. You actually don't have to do the experiment. But first, before you actually submit your experiment, let's get into what that means, that we're more than our brain. So I'm going to contrast big C consciousness with little c consciousness. So first, what is little c consciousness? And we have these quotes from Marvin Minsky, who is a famous philosopher, who said, "You're a machine made of meat," or Francis Crick, "You're nothing but a pack of neurons." And this has been the mainstream neuroscientific position for the past couple of decades, although it's moving slowly. But the idea is that we're just basically a pack of neurons and a machine made of meat. There's nothing to consciousness, it's an illusion. And this all comes from the idea that very complex behavior and system can emerge from a simple rule. And we see that all the time in nature. It also comes from the idea of predictive coding in neuroscience, in which our brain just maps the world and basically play different scenarios, and whichever scenario comes to happen gets reinforced. So it's just our brain is just a predictive machine. Let's just try to predict what's going to come next, and it's really good at it. And that comes from this idea that because it evolved to become a predictive machine, that's why our mind builds all these stories of ourselves and others. And recently you have some headlines. It was a couple of months ago already in June, but Google LaMDA. So LaMDA is an artificial intelligence system designed by Google. And one of the engineers said, well, it is conscious. And so I don't feel ethically, I can't really work on this, etc. So it's still something, a lot of reaction from the community with Google denying it's conscious, and then all the most of the neuroscientific community saying obviously it's not conscious, it's just a machine, a program running on the computer. But that's the idea of little c, that you can have consciousness emerge from something completely inert. So now what is big C consciousness by contrast? Well, it comes down to the hard problem of consciousness. And the hard problem of consciousness, the term itself, it's been around for a long time. The term itself has been coined by a philosopher, Daniel Chalmers, and it's the consciousness as the sense of being. How can the sense of being arise from just inert interaction? And from both a scientific and ontological, by ontological means intuitive perspective, consciousness should not be able to arise from just inert interaction. If I slow down the machine, which is the brain, down to nanosecond, I should be able to see every chemical reaction. And there's nothing conscious about that. So it's hard to reconcile the two, that consciousness, the sense of being, can emerge from from non-conscious interaction. And that's being coined the hard problem of consciousness, or as you can see here, the awe of, being at night looking at the sky. It's also hard to imagine that this could be reduced to something that's purely mechanical. And it's not just the regular public or artists would think this way. Nature, which is one of the main journal in science, one of the two most reputable, they set a special issue on the biggest question in science in May 2018. And what is consciousness was one of them. What is dark matter was another one of them. But this is one big question for science. So it's just not artists that think this way, that consciousness is a hard problem to tackle, and then science has solved it because it's the little c. It's also among scientists, there's still a debate. What is consciousness? And the idea is that also, I don't think we'll get, it's not a straight line where we'll get answer. It's going to be very convoluted path, as it has been, because consciousness is not a simple matter to track. Sometimes we'll go backwards, sometimes we'll go forward, but it's not like a standard scientific topic where we can expect to get more and more and better results. And so here, I'm going to split it. I'm going to ask a question, and basically we're going to split along different axes. The first question is, are you your brain? Are you your brain? If the answer is yes, then it's the materialist reductionist hypothesis. It's the little c hypothesis, and the fact that big C just doesn't exist. You are your brain. No, you're not your brain. And so then there's there's different. So let's imagine you're not your brain. So consciousness could be an epiphenomenon, but consciousness is real. So that's the first thing. In the first statement here, when you answer yes, consciousness is not real. I'm going to put my laser pointer. So here, consciousness is not real. Here, consciousness is real. But it could be an epiphenomenon. It could be something real that emerged from the activity of neuron. And if it's real, there's two different hypotheses again. One is that it's a pure epiphenomenon, so it has no causal influence on the world. If it has zero causal influence on the world, you're conscious, but it doesn't make any difference, basically, of being conscious or not being conscious. We could be a machine made of meat. We just happen to be conscious, but conscious has no influence possibly on the world. And that's the absence of free will, basically. And this is where I would say most neuroscientists fall these days. They believe consciousness is real, but they also believe consciousness has no causal influence. Or no, consciousness is more than an epiphenomenon, and consciousness can have an influence in the world. And if we have an influence in the world, there's two, again, split. One is it can have non-local influence, so influence possibly at a distance, like telepathy, for example. Or no, it's just real, it's contained with the brain, it can influence the brain, but it doesn't have non-local influence. So this is just where consciousness can be. And I'm not saying it's one place or another. I'm just saying this is the map, or where it can possibly be. And my hypothesis personally is that it's in this realm, that consciousness is more than the brain, number one, and consciousness can have potentially non-local influence. And this is based on both theoretical theories and scientific results. Theories mostly because we've been taught that the world, so the world, which is best described by quantum mechanics, is everything is entangled. Basically, entangles means you have coupling that is instantaneous, sometimes to the other side of the universe. And some of the theories which are mainstream claim that we actually are and still entangled with the Big Bang. And the Big Bang is everywhere. It's not just some place. It's everywhere. And yeah, so with this idea, it's not so much of a stretch to think that, okay, our consciousness could potentially have non-local influence. And so how do we decide that this is true? So to decide this is true or not, we need to do scientific experiments. So we have, on one hand, we have first-person experience, which does inform us about our beliefs. But if we want to use the tools of science, then we need to run experiments. And there's different levels of experiments. There's anecdotes. I had the telepathy experiment with my brother on the other side of the world. And this is very hard to prove. So this is the bottom of the pyramid. It doesn't mean it's not real, but it's just not a scientific experiment. Then there's case study. So we're just studying one person in more detail, documenting. Then there's exploratory experiment, planned experiment, pre-registered experiment, where we detail exactly what we're going to do in advance. Independently replicated experiment. When you do an experiment in your lab, it doesn't prove much. Somebody else, somewhere, another scientist has to reproduce it. And if they find the same result, then there is a consensus, and we can agree that this is more robust. And then we have systematic reviews. So systematic reviews is when you have a bunch of laboratory and scientists who have run the same experiments, like probably 20 or more, and somebody decides to summarize the results. So they take all the results and they do a systematic review. And when they also do some numerical analysis, they have access to all the data from all these experiments. They can rerun the same analysis, but with much more data, thousands of people. And so this is, again, more convincing. And then at the very top, there's applications. If you have a device that allows you to zap your brain to become telepathic with someone else, then obviously, this can't be denied because this is an application. And we actually did a review of the different type of psi experiments. So by psi, I mean telepathy is one of them, but you also have the claim that people can communicate with the deceased, etc. And then we classified them into different level of evidence. So level A is very, very strong evidence, and level F is a systematic fraud. So let's just look at level A. So level A requires objective planned studies, usually blinded. Like if, for example, we would ask participants, they wouldn't know which group they're in. They wouldn't know if they're in the telepathic group or in the control group, for example. It's been replicated by different groups. It can be explained by materialist science, and it's also usually observable in real time. You don't need to run statistics. You don't need to run 1,000 subjects. You can just potentially see it using naturalistic observation here, see it in real time. And actually, none of the experiments we tested in psi research reach that level. And then obviously at the level F, you have fraud where people are cheating, and this is where you get the results you get. When we reviewed the literature, we did find some compelling evidence. So show me the evidence. It didn't reach level A, but it did reach level B, which is just one below. And before we go into the evidence of potential non-local influence of consciousness, I want to mention some other recent results, which are much less controversial. But for example, in 2021, it was shown that women's menstrual cycle is actually coupled with moon phases. And this sounds obvious, both are close to 30 days. But actually, it's only in 2021 that there was control experiment that were able to show that. So we are entangled with our environment. At least women's are. Also, our body and brain can feel the electromagnetic field. So some researcher built this complex room here where they could manipulate the magnetic field, and people were able to sense that. So we knew this was true for pigeons. Pigeons can orient themselves using the Earth magnetic field. So that's how they can travel long distance. But we didn't know it was possible for humans. So we are in our environment, and we can perceive to some extent the Earth magnetic field. And what's even more interesting is that we are also sensitive to solar flares. So, and again, that's not that controversial anymore. This has been published in 2018. It has been reproduced since. But basically, whenever there's more solar sunspots, this can influence the Earth magnetic field. And we actually see it in people heartbeats. Their heartbeat tends to be more regular when there is more sunspots. This indicates they are more stressed. And this was done on thousands of people. So mainstream science tells us we already entangle the environment. We're not independent. And you can imagine, for example, if the Earth if the sun influenced the magnetic field, you can imagine a mechanism where telepathy could happen through that means. Two people get stressed at the same time because of more sunspots, and you could imagine a mechanism where telepathy could be mediated by this kind of phenomena. Then we have also people mental experience. So this is a survey we did where we had 1,200 meditators, and we asked them, what kind of experience have you ever had in your meditation? And more than half of them said, I had non-physical entities, I had clairvoyance or telepathy, and I had a connection, non-local connection with my guru. And these are not meditators who necessarily believe that telepathy is real. These are experiences they report having during their meditation. So it doesn't mean these experiments are real. It just means that people actually believe they were real, and that it's a worthy topic of investigation. If half the population believe this is real, it's probably worth being studied. In my research on this topic, I was mostly interested in mediumship. Mediumship is when you go see a medium and you ask them to communicate with one of your deceased relatives. And the idea here is that not that consciousness survive bodily death necessarily. It could be that the medium used telepathy. The idea is that they would have access to some non-local information through a means that is not known right now. Why should we study mediums? Well, first, they're easy to find. You go to any small town, you will find someone who claims to be a medium. So it's the actually only paranormal job. Second, part of their job, actually half the interview, is about trying to convince you that they're in contact with your deceased relative. So they focus on evidence. And sometimes there is fishing for information, it's been shown, but in double-blind studies, it's also been shown that they have access to information they shouldn't have access to through normal means. So that's why we were interested in mediums. And the way we did it is we invited people in the lab, mediums, professional mediums, who were just doing that for as a livelihood. They could not mention they were working with us, by the way. They couldn't advertise, oh, by the way, I'm being studied. This was part of their agreement. And we had 12 mediums and 12 controls. We showed them 200 pictures in 3 categories. So all the pictures were pictures of deceased individuals. And some had had a heart attack, some had died of a car accident, and some were killed by gunshot. So you just look at the picture and you have to press 1, 2, or 3 if you think it's a heart attack, car accident, or death by firearm. And at the same time, we record their brainwave. This is my PhD student here, Cedric Connard, recording some brainwave. And we had research grade brainwave system. So here we can do a very simple experiment, and you can imagine you're doing it. So 3 categories, you have to choose one of them. And I'm going to show you a couple of pictures, 3 pictures. One was, one died of heart attack, one died by car accident, one died by a firearm. So first one. Second one. And third one. And so drum rolls. And this is the result. So this person died of a heart attack, this person died of auto crash, and this person died of homicide. So if you were to do the experiment, you would be sitting in front of a computer and trying to feel for 200 of these, about 200 of these pictures. Why 200? Why not 3? Well, because with 200, we can do powerful statistics. With 3, there's a chance you could get them all right, just by chance. You just got lucky. With 200, if you get the 200 rights, you didn't get lucky. There was something more than luck, because the likelihood you would get all of them by chance is 1 in a trillion. So this is why we use many pictures. So these are our results. And here chance, because we have 2 pictures, 3 pictures, the chance is at 66.6%. And then you can see that actually when we take all this is the controls and the mediums. When we take everybody, so the odds against chance is 1 in 41. So in all likelihood, then they use some means other than just chance. It was just more than chance. And it doesn't mean necessarily that they were accessing non-local consciousness. It could be that there's some cues in the pictures that says, oh, this person is more aggressive. So they could be, they're more likely to be shot by firearm. Or if this person looks more sick, so this person is going to die of a heart attack. So it's not necessarily a clear cut. It's hard to get clear cut answers in this on this topic. It's just warrant more investigation to show that these effects are real. But it does show that it is statistically significant. And by the way, these were the green were mediums and the red were controls. So the controls did as well, if not better, than the medium in that specific experiment. And we also found some difference in brain activity between the mediums and the controls. Mostly, so this is what we call the event-related potential. And so here is the presentation of the face, and we see some activity which is different, and we publish that in Brain and Cognition. We also published a series of other results on this topic. We try to publish in mainstream science journals, not in obscure journal that no scientists will read. So our goal is to reach the scientific community and bring interest to these topics. And also, I'm going to mention another experiments we're running right now. This is a website we call GotSci. So it's gotsci.org, in which we try to recruit talents. So people were really good at doing this task, and they can play these 8 games. And we're ranking people. Then we're taking the best, and then we're testing them again to try to see if they can replicate good results. So that's another experiment we're conducting on this topic. So how does it work? Here, that's the, so there's many hypotheses how this could work. And this is also the topic of the prize, is try to explain to find experiments to see how it works. I like this one because some researcher, which I know, argue that this is just the energy, consciousness, and the energy of the vacuum. Consciousness pulls basically its essence from the energy of the vacuum. So you have trying somebody that unlocks the energy of the vacuum right there. And this is a real hypothesis by Joachim Kepler. So this is just one of many potential hypotheses how this could potentially work. And I think I'm at the end of my time. We've published a paper, What If Consciousness as an Emergent Property of the Brain. It's now in Frontiers. And again, I invite you to go see our website to try to apply to your prize and get it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Arnaud. Let's see if you have some questions. We have a couple of minutes. Anybody have any questions for Arnaud?
I'm going to put the link in the description so you can go see and apply to that prize.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be great. Well, if we don't have anybody else asking, I'm going to ask a question that I actually know the answer to, but I'm going to put you on the record with it, get you to talk about it a little bit. How has been the reception to trying to publish this and to keep it published in mainstream journals?
Yeah, it's very challenging because there's a lot of angry people who just think that's not even worth of studying. Actually, one of my best friends from my PhD, which is a major editor, he says pigs don't fly, you know, so I can't be that. And that's, I think, the main criticism is like, oh, you know, you just want to put everything upside down. You know, science doesn't work this way. We know, you know, cell phone works, etc. And if you show, you know, telepathy is real, then everything we've ever discovered is wrong. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's just a misconception. It's not like science is incremental. So, you know, this effect is part of nature. This effect is part of nature, but they all coexist together. And it's like electricity. You know, people live without knowing electricity was real for thousands of years, and they still had the wheels. They had some basic element of science. And it's not like discovering electricity prevented them from making wheels or any of the other technology they knew before. So I think that's one of the fear. It's mostly based on fear, and there is a lot of resistance. It's very hard to publish in mainstream on this topic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just checking again for questions real quick. I think it's interesting because most people, I think, assume that science is like open, you know, and that it's just all about evidence and that it's a level playing field of evidence, and they don't realize how difficult it is actually to advance things like this.
And actually, there's a saying in science advances one funeral at a time.
Right.
So as the old scientists stop, you know, clinging, then we can make some progress.
Yeah, if you've built your whole career for 30 or 40 years on mediumship is not a real phenomenon, and you're in control of the information flow, you're not likely to flush your career findings down the drain anytime soon, right?
Yeah.